place where no one is seen as a stranger, where no one is ever faced with danger. A place that is gentle, kind and light, where nothing would ever trigger a fight. A place that is boundless and wide, where we walk with angels side by side. A place of smiles and happy tears, where our hearts are open and there are no more fears. A place where love is seen on every face and arms are open wide to embrace. A place where everyone measures the same, where you are true though, and yet no one knows your name. A place where mysteries are explored, where truth is accepted and never ignored. A place where those of old age are wide-eyed and still learning, where time seems to rewind and to youth we are returning.
Hey, folks. Hello, Pastor Norman.
Well, hey there, hey there, hey there.
Come on in, little baby girl. Come on over here. How are you doing? You surviving this heat wave?
I am. How about you guys?
Yes, it was kind of a different day for us because I told you guys we had electrical issues with Duke Energy, and they had to come out today and repair it. And that means they had to turn the transformer off, so it was without power first thing this morning at 7. And they got it fixed. We went out and ran a few errands and things and came back, and it was done. So that was good. So that was the beginning of our day. But now we have air. Thank God. Thank God. Thank God.
Well, praise God for that, because it's
been
in the 3 digits.
Yeah, no, it's hot, I tell you. But and they picked the hottest day of the year to come and do that. But I'm grateful that it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Let me turn this volume up just a tad. Let me know if you guys can see and hear us clearly. And I'm running to try to get here, so I'm a little out of breath. Little out of breath. Pastor Norman, you doing good?
I am just doing this and that.
Doing this and that.
Yeah, being busy when I don't need to be.
Oh my gosh. Good afternoon, Sissy and brother-in-law. Good afternoon, Dee Dee. You and George and Jamal and Diaquilin is here. Hey, Diaquilin. And whoever else. Thank you, Diaquilin, for letting me know you can hear and see us good. And whoever else is here. It's an interesting week, isn't it?
Very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Not surprising, though.
No, not really surprising, but it's not surprising, but it's a little bit frustrating with all of the things that are going on, and can be disturbing a little bit. There are 2 words that I want to discuss a little bit of. And you may have heard this, Pastor Norman. I'll give you guys time to get in here and get going pretty good. 2 words, and you can type them in if you choose. One of them is deconstruction, and the other is decolonization. And I'll kind of explain what they are in relative to spirituality in just a moment. In the meantime, let's see. I'll take this banner down here. Where is it at? Where is that? There it is. There it is. There it is. There it is. You been studying anything good lately, brother? Pastor Norman?
I have. I've been studying concerning, and I ministered on that on Sunday afternoon concerning the image of God, the Latin word for Imago Dei. And I was sharing my subtopic. Well, the topic was the image of God. Subtopic: God casting His shadow. And
Oh, okay.
so, pretty much, it's still yet along the lines of oneness, but like I said, with a lot of different groups of people, they have not been exposed to, once again, that particular teaching dealing with oneness and how we are actually um, God in us as us. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I was sharing with them concerning how God impressed Himself, just like when we take a signet ring and we put it in, we make a seal, we
Mm-hmm.
impress it. Well, that's what
Mm-hmm.
happened in the Genesis narrative where God formed man from the dust of the earth, where He impressed Himself into creation. And
Yeah.
so, when elaborating again concerning all the things that's happening, what is revealing unto us as man is I wouldn't say, well, let's say mankind as a whole is reverting back to its primitive self,
Mm-hmm.
becoming more animalistic, following the human appetite versus reflecting God in the earth. And so I was talking about Jesus, first of all, being the express image of God, which is mentioned in Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. He was the brightness of the Father. And so my daughter, years ago, Tamara, she did a message where she had cut the lights off, and then she had this I would say like a lamp, and had
Mm-hmm.
someone stand in front of the lamp, and it cast a shadow
Mm-hmm.
on the wall. And so as I was heading to service, that's where the subtopic came: God casting His shadow, because that's all we really are, is the shadow of
Mm-hmm.
God Himself, which means He's real, He's the one, but through our ability to actualize, we reflect Him, His qualities, His essence in the earth.
That's
And
good. That's good.
we
Yeah, I like
reflect
that.
it back to Romans chapter 8 again, verse 19, where creation is earnestly expecting, waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God. And so, again, because everything is one, creation itself, again, is looking for the reflection of its creator, which is God. And that's
Mm-hmm.
God in us as us,
Yeah.
Christ in us, the hope of glory. And so
Yes.
pretty much I did a lot of demonstration and so forth. And afterwards, the response was amazing.
That sounds good. That sounds really interesting. That's a good discussion topic as well. It's a good way to kind of break in, break some of them in, I should say. But you mentioned something about the human nature, and I remember Dr. David Hawkins talking about mankind at some point evolved into what is called a rapacious nature, which is, I mean, they tend to ravage, and that's why we have canine teeth.
Mm-hmm.
We all have the canine teeth, like the beasts have,
Mm-hmm.
like the beasts have, because the part of us that is physical is like a beast.
Exactly.
It can be trained, and it basically is only concerned with its survival. What? What?
Which
Why are
makes
you
us,
making so many faces? What is it?
Canine teeth.
Canine teeth, yes. Unless you don't have teeth, you got canine teeth.
and,
Some
and,
people,
and
some people are bigger than us.
if dad can remember, he mentioned an incident dealing with Nebuchadnezzar, who
Yes,
reverted back to his animalistic, primitive
yes,
self,
yes.
because and so he became as a wild beast.
A wild beast.
So
Yes.
I talked to you about that
all
today.
that we're being exposed to, the violence, being very inhumane,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
the treatment, we're not reflecting the essence of God in the earth, and at the same time, that's why creation as a living entity. I like to say this: is having a temper tantrum, looking for its father and creator. That's how I say.
I like that. John Greason's already started. He's starting already. Talking
What
about
he
little,
say?
little Red Riding Hood.
That's right.
Yeah, we all have fangs. We do.
Mhm.
And those fangs are there because we and that humanity aspect of us have that kind of nature. And that's why a lot of us are carnivorous, actually.
Mhm.
And so we got a little bit of cannibalism in there. But it goes back to how we are now evolving from that nature, that what Dr. Hawkins calls rapacious nature. It's a raping nature.
Mhm.
We're evolving from that into the God nature that we already are. It's so we said this on Sunday. It's being peeled off. The identities of that is being peeled off like an onion is peeled. And so we're shedding layers and layers and layers of egoic identities.
Mhm.
And what's left is that divine nature that we are.
Mhm. And you mentioning again about that part, that human nature, that I'll say the wild side.
Wild side, yes.
Even in the book of James, it talks about how mankind has the ability to tame every creature, even the largest creature, which is
Mm-hmm,
the whale.
mm-hmm,
Once again, we could tame, but we lack we have the ability, but we really don't do it, taming our own selves. But he actually makes
yes.
reference to our tongue and so forth. So yeah, those are the things that again, we have the ability to actualize God, but then there is the other fight where we actually have been really involved in self actualization, which means
Yes.
we as when God created us, he gave us the ability to make choice as well,
Mm-hmm,
dealing with self-awareness, but the decision either to reflect him or to actualize our own self is the struggle that we're actually having.
yeah. And you mentioned the well, we were talking about training the beast, and I always go back and reflect on how we learned about dogs and how to train them. To train a dog is not so much to learn uh, how to deal with them, so much as you learn to how to deal with yourself. And when you're dealing with that dog, you especially, excuse me, especially if they are alpha in nature, you learn their nature and then you conduct or change your behavior to be able to deal with their nature. So a lot of times in training the beast, I should say, when we're talking about the human nature, uh, a lot of us don't know our human nature. That's why we talk in these sessions about the nature of the mind. A lot of people believe that they are their mind. They believe they are their thoughts. They think they're thinking those thoughts. But if they were actually thinking those thoughts, when they start to think thoughts that they don't like, they would be able to stop them. But they're
Mhm.
not able to stop them because they're not actually thinking those thoughts. It's simply the beastic nature that's
Mhm.
thinking those thoughts. And so that beast has to be trained. And that's where the processes of self improvement and all of that comes in. And that's why sometimes it is beneficial, but some people tackle that aspect. They go at it from that angle. Just I'm going to improve on this beastie nature,
Mhm.
and then they never really discover that they're not that beastie nature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is now just you mentioned about the training of the beast, not just a dog, but any wild animal.
Yeah. Yes.
Um, could it be possible? Because we had the example that happened at one time when Earl and I had came to your house, and he couldn't get baby girl to leave out of the house for nothing in the world.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
Y'all explained why.
mhm,
But I was able to get her out. She followed
mhm.
me outside, and I took her for a walk. And so
Yeah.
you explained because Earl will play with her, you know, and so forth, and then she noticed me as an alpha.
Yeah.
So could it be possible, and we say alpha, but could it be possible that when it comes to taming an animal, that they become aware, or they are identifying the divine, our divine nature more than our human nature?
Well, I guess you could say that, yes. More than anything, they read the energy that that person carries.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I remember, and this is no reflection on Earl, but I remember when Earl would play with baby girl, he was always a little bit intimidated by her, just a teeny bit, not really trusting of her. And so he would move very slow, methodically, and
I remember that.
that freaked her out.
Uh-huh.
So him not trusting her made her not trust him.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
So it's a reflection again. It's a
And that's the
reflection.
key, the reflection. So that just brings us back to, again, and that's what I've been really focused on, studying, researching, because again, if we are him in the earth, and we follow the Genesis narrative, and we go to Psalms 82, again stating that everything is out of course, once
Mhm.
again, because his children know nothing, understand nothing, they walk in darkness.
Yeah, it says the gods are out of course.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so again, it's us not reflecting the essence and
Mhm.
the nature of God, which means we actually is not walking in the authority that we talk about, that was freely given unto us to represent him in the earth, or to
Wow.
reflect him in the earth. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I wanted to respond to what Jacqueline said, which is so true. She said, I feel that that's what we're seeing in the world now, a clash between the divine nature and that human nature. The human beast is fighting and resisting. Well, and it's actually uh, struggling to remain in the alpha position.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes, yes.
And it's amazing that she mentioned that, because in actuality, that's what happens in the wild kingdom. In order
Mhm.
for one to become the alpha or the leader of the pack, in reference like lions, male lions will have to battle.
Yes.
Whichever one dominates, he becomes the leader of the pride.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
saw something just recently dealing with um, their they're like sea lions, but it's another name. They're bigger, actually big, humongous. Like
Walruses,
almost
walrus.
like a walrus, but
Mhm.
they're actually bigger. And it was showing how this one that was all the other, we'll say walrus, was around them, and he was considered the alpha, the head.
Yeah, the bull, the bull.
There you go. And then another one came,
Mm-hmm.
and they start, and the way they battled is them putting their teeth into one another, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah.
which one ever won the battle, that's the one that became the head over the rest of them, or I'll say the group, or the pride. So that is something similar to what we're seeing now,
That's
as
the
we're
beast nature. Yeah.
seeing ego, and I said something, as they're coming to the table, having these so-called supposedly peace talks, they're bringing their egos to the table rather than love.
Yes.
Love is not at
Yes.
the table. So
Yes.
yeah.
That's true. In fact, the beast nature is nothing but egotistical thinking and egotistical uh, power struggles. And in fact, we see that in the corporate world. We see that everywhere.
Hmm.
Uh, we tend to we kind of been desensitized to it because it's not always something that kills the body, but it can kill the spirit, it can kill the actual psyche of a person, it can destroy them that way. And a lot of people are not being killed physically, but they're being killed psychologically, and
Exactly.
through that power play. And it's like I said to my husband earlier, we talked about in our the world that we're living in now, especially in political world, what we're seeing is there's a party now that has become so power hungry to remain in power and to be in power that they've lost their conscience.
Exactly. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, and that was something that I shared as well, because if you note, I mean, now I'm gonna go with the word common sense. Common sense would tell us that we could get more accomplished if we come together as one. But like you just said, it's about a power struggle. It's not even about, say, if I came up with a great idea that would our whole nation would benefit from, because I'm not part of your party, you would not even accept my idea. I mean,
Right.
even in the situation where it just happened, and of course we don't want to stay on it, but even on the situation
Right.
that's happened, much discussion right now, how the decision was made without consulting with Congress and not even consulting with the heads of the other party.
Intelligence, actually,
You left
yes.
them
Yes.
totally out.
Mhm.
So that is an indication of power struggle.
Yes, yes.
You know?
And so it's not it isn't so important whether the decision was the right thing to do or not.
Exactly.
It's that now we know that that is the driving force, and of
Mhm.
course that driving force will devastate anything in its way.
Mhm.
Um, I brought up two words, and I brought those words up because I wanted to kind of touch on it. I don't know if we're going to stay on it or not, but I brought it up: deconstruction and decolonization. I told you guys to type that in if you would. Um, I'm noticing, and one of the reasons I'm bringing this up, Pastor Norman, is because you and my husband both, I know, are prophets. You were born prophets. You didn't become prophets. Prophetic, or I won't say prophetic people, because prophetic people are not necessarily prophets. They become prophetic by hanging around other prophets. But when you're born a prophet, there's the scripture that talks about that God will not do anything except he reveals it to his prophet, the servants,
Amos 3 and
his
7.
servant, the prophet. That goes back to what Dad said years ago in an experience that he had when he was working for R.J. Reynolds, and he was going through a like a a time of trying to get something that was actually his. He deserved to have, and in the process of that, he found himself at odds with R.J. Reynolds. So in trying to get that they owed him, he ended up having to go to an attorney which was R.J. Reynolds' attorney that I knew and he met because of me. And therefore he was able to get what he needed because that attorney went and gave him the access to it. So anyway, going back, the attorney in the physical world, it looked as if the attorney got access for him. But in actuality, Dad had an experience where he went to the council room. You've heard him talk about it. He went to the council room and they were having a meeting, and his name was in the room where they had the meeting. It was about him.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, he was told that the claim had been settled and that he would get what he needed. And he did.
Mm-hmm.
The council room is where the prophets receive the instructions of what God's going to do next.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense? So the prophets have that ability, or I should say, they have that access to the council room. And while we didn't think of it in this sense, we just thought, well, okay, God graced you to see this particular thing happening for him as an experience. But in actuality, is what prophets are supposed, that's the norm for prophets.
Mm-hmm.
Having said all that, the council is now talking about what's happening in this country.
Exactly. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And the prophets are receiving the
Mm-hmm.
information about what's going to come next.
Exactly.
Some may be getting more of that information than others. more detail, but
Mhm.
all of the prophets are saying the same thing. And I want to
Mhm.
say this, particularly, I won't say all of the prophets because there is a section of prophets that are in agreement with what's happening in our country. So therefore, they're not privy to, because of their preferences and their preferences,
Mhm.
they're not privy to what God is about to do. So here we go. The younger prophets, and I should say more specifically, my tongue is tied, more specifically, the African American prophets or the uh, African prophets, or I should say just Black prophets. The Black prophets, if they're in alignment, are now all having the same council report. Okay?
Mhm.
That council report is coming to a lot of the younger African American or African prophets, or I'll say
Mhm.
prophets of color,
Mhm.
because this season it seems that the energy or uh, the egoic mind is against the people of color.
Mhm.
So therefore, the prophets of color are the ones who are hearing the council report. That
Mhm.
makes sense.
Makes sense. Yes, ma'am.
So here we go. Decolonization, and this isn't about racism. What I'm about to say, it isn't about blacks being better than whites or whites being better than blacks. I don't. That's not what I'm talking about. Even though may sound that way, that is not where I'm coming from. Decolonization is this: the people of color, the prophets of color, or I should say, the spiritual people of color, had spirituality before they were introduced into a European culture. Okay? So,
Mhm.
because they were already spiritual, not necessarily Christian, but very spiritual, had their own practices, had their own experiences, and their own concepts and things of God. Okay? So now that we have all been people of color introduced to the European culture, we have been colonized. Hence, that's what the latest movie they did called Sinners, was about.
Exactly.
Okay, it was
Exactly.
about that. So we all people of color have been colonized and brought in and programmed by the European culture, which we know is the white culture. Not
Mhm.
coming against it, I'm just saying that's what it is.
Mhm.
Decolonization is when those of color begin to see through the illusion. And because they're seeing through the illusion, they now have a whole different outlook and a whole different take on what's going to happen.
Exactly.
Now you're smiling. Why are you smiling?
Because of something I had said to our people, uh, uh, there was a lot I could not share doing my broadcast that morning because of certain things that we have to be careful not
Yeah.
to say
Yep.
while we're on social media. And so there were
Yep.
a lot of things that I was able to elaborate on our afternoon gathering
Mhm.
because we are not taping that. And so, but I was told we got to record all of this that you're saying. I was letting my congregation know that which you just said, because I did the study and research, especially when it comes to the introduction of the King James Bible
Mhm.
to the Western world. That was part of a colonization
Yes.
process.
Yes. Yes.
Because again, that Bible is derived from the Catholic Bible. The word Catholic, people don't understand, means universal.
Yes.
Um, which has more chapters, more books in it than the King James.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so, of course, Dad even mentioned this in the Vatican, in Catholicism. There are some things that is not being revealed to the world that
True.
we know to be true. And so, um, I had told them, I said, because the culture of our ministry and our gathering has totally changed. We're not caught up on the music anymore. There are times where we just come in and we go at it. And when you mention that, I remember looking at a documentary where when the slaves were brought over from Africa, like you said, they were already spiritual. And so what happened, they was introduced, and I'm gonna use this terminology, European religion.
Yes.
And so because they could not read or whatever, they took on the pattern of what they
Yes.
was hearing from their slave master.
Yes.
And they mix what they brought from their native land with the dancing, the music, and all of that, and they integrated that with what they were receiving from their masters as far as Christianity and
Yes.
so forth. And so that's why when you now I'm understanding the direction that you're going, is as if our ministry has went through a deconstruction of things.
There you go.
Things that really should have never actually been the focus. Again, it's not about a right or wrong.
No, it's not. It's not.
But again, it was not necessary. It was actually robbing us from our awareness of who we are. And so the word religion means to bind.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what had happened to us. So when you said that, it brought me back to something that I said to our people, that said, look, if for those of you that's trying to recapture what was before 2020, that is not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
And I'm saying this in a very beneficial way, not condemning, not convicting, but we are transcending.
We are. We are.
And so when that happens, there are things that, like you said earlier, is peeled off or begins to fall away. And it's all a process of maturing.
Yes. Now, and I want to just briefly mention this just because it kind of gives a little more understanding of where I'm coming from and why I'm saying what I'm saying. Here in this area, the Piedmont, North Carolina area, there's the Moravians. The Moravians, which is a Christian organization, Christian sect, and they had slaves. They were Europeans that had slaves. They settled in this area. The actual first Black Christian was a man that worked as a slave for the Europeans. He became a Christian because they beat him until he accepted Christ.
Wow.
This is an actual fact. Okay, that's colonization. So my reason for saying that is this: the younger, or I say younger because Dad and I are in the twilight of our years. But the younger group, your age and younger, the prophets who are of color, have studied outside of the confines of religion. And they have come upon knowledge that has superseded what we've even known, because they've been privy to that knowledge. And so they look at life differently. They understand what colonization is, whereas we did not. We were completely caught up in it. Grace brought Dad and I to where we are in this deconstruction and decolonization. But a lot of people haven't had the abundance of grace to have done that for whatever reason. So the younger prophets of color have now a full understanding of where the European culture in the religion of Christianity, where it has taken all of us as people of color. And so now we are being deconstructed, as you said, from the ways that we've been taught that we thought was right or we thought was preferred. I'll say it like that. And now we're rediscovering who we are why we are and what we're supposed to be actually, how we're supposed to see this whole thing.
Exactly.
Dad and I just recently, and some of y'all may already know it, but the reason they called it White House was because it was not because it was painted white, but it was a house for white Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
They had
And
meetings.
it's built like a plantation.
They had meetings from different levels of wealthy slave owners. They had parties there and dinners, and the slaves that worked around them were the upper class slaves that they, like when my aunt used to go to work, she worked for a manager of a bank, and they bought her linen clothes,
Uniforms.
to wear to look real exquisite on the job. And she was the slave kitchen cook, and she served them and cleaned up the house and all that. The White House was like that, or like a club, a party for the rich and wealthy in D.C. And that's why the White House looked like it did.
I hope I'm safe to implement this. But it was also a place where secret societies had gathered.
I didn't get that part in, but that's true. That's true. It was a lot of undercover stuff and ideas that was going on to enlarge and make the business. Now, somebody came up with this idea who was the president over the business. President over the business at the White House.
So now let me say this, because I don't want anyone to get the idea that I'm pushing racism. I don't want anybody to get the idea that we're talking about black against
we're
white.
not talking about that.
We're not talking about, but what we are talking about is being deconstructed from a lot of the ways and thinking that they have put inside of us. There's a scripture I'm going to read right quick, if I can get to it. And this is going to maybe, I've read it before, but I was like, okay.
While she's looking for that, the book of Daniel talks about them being with Nebuchadnezzar, symbolizing what we're talking about now. But the thing that came up with Daniel was that he was spirituality. He was spirituality of the house so well that Nebuchadnezzar consulted him for insight and wisdom from the other side, the spirit world, to advise his business at the White House. Paraphrasing, this is the reason why we are having this divisions of right hand, left hand, because there was a split. Some slave owners believe that the slaves ought to be this. They got into a big debate about this thing. This is history, and the younger people may not ever hear this because we didn't hear this in school. We had to find it out after we got out of school. What we're talking. My family came in Yadkinville, North Carolina. The name Sawyer came from slaves being used in sawmills, and they gave the slave owner's name. And my name was born out of a Sawyer. And a Sawyer was somebody who rode on like a tram or a train on the side of a big blade that sawed the logs in the real 2x4s, real 4x4s. And he would pull this lever, and that lever would either turn the logs or make the blade go in and out the way it would make sure it was saw the same board. It would go down the track sawing, and then when he come back up, he'd balance it out again, come back up, and come back and saw it. He had to ride the saw blade, and he was called a sawyer. That's what I found out. And so up there where my family came from in Yadkinville, there was a place up there they call it Cedar Hill and Dink's Bottom and all that kind of stuff. And that's where the slavery and their main thing was tobacco, farming and tobacco, and the slaves did all of that. But my granddad had that kind of business with slave, and her grandfather did too, with tobacco and crops. And we used to go up there and pick blackberries and in the fields and visit around the churches. One of the old churches up there was called Glen Chapel. That's where the black folks used no racial discrimination. Please understand. And I know you guys are mature enough not to. That's where spirituality went about. And I had a chance to, as a little boy, to sit in the audience and watch a lady dressed up in a black baptismal robe. And I'm here, knee high to a duck's butt. And I'm looking around over across the bench, knee high to a duck's butt. Now I'm a little bitty. And I saw this lady preach. And I didn't know that she was a shadow of me 23 years later, preaching at the same church.
Mm-hmm.
I saw her.
Yeah.
But this is going back to groups who pulled away and had their own thing, and then the other side had theirs. And they were colonizing. And up there in this place where my family was, they were a colony of Sawyers and a colony of people who stayed in places that they camped up together.
Yeah, and it's important what you just said. Colonies, they want everyone to think the same way.
Yeah, they do. That's
it's
right.
important
That's
that we are. There are so many scriptures that I could pull that I'm not going to pull that talk about in your King James Version in Colossians 3:22. He says, servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God. They're talking about slaves.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about slaves. Okay. 1 Timothy 6:1 says, let as many servants as are under the yoke count their own masters worthy of all honor, that the name of God and his doctrine be not blasphemed. This is slavery.
Mm-hmm.
It's in your Bible. This is colonization.
Yeah.
This is European culture pushed over and thrust down the throats of people of color.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? In Titus 2:9, and I could keep going, but I won't. This is the last one I'm going to read. In the 9th verse of the 2nd chapter of Titus, it says, exhort your servants to be obedient unto their own masters, and to please them well in all things, not answering again. In other words, don't give them no back talk.
Now,
That's slavery. That's colonization.
Now,
I know I'm on my soapbox.
yeah,
But we don't realize how we have even had that happen in our services and our church services. And so a lot of the things we've adopted and adapted to has not been what God wanted for us.
We try to spiritualize it, but you're not on your soapbox. Remember, I shared before that when you study how the New King James Version came to be, how it was compiled by bishops and archbishops and theological teachers that was up under the leadership of King James. He wanted this to be done because he was protesting against the Catholic Church. He had just became the monarch of 3 nations, and he needed one religion to have them govern the 3 nations that he became the monarch of. So it was colonization. That's what it was all about.
Yes.
Now, so that's how we got the Protestant religion.
Exactly. I'm going to read one more. It says in 1 Peter 3:18, servants, be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to the good ones and the gentle ones, but also to the evil ones. That's slavery. That's colonization. This is what has been programmed into us people of color. even in our Christian religion. So even though we are treated in most cases as equals, we are not considered equals. It's like and I've heard so many people say, I love black people. Excuse my French, and I'm not teaching racism. They say, I love black people. I love my dog, but I ain't gonna let my dog eat at my table.
Mm-hmm.
Got me? So there's still the distinction, even when there is real love.
Yeah.
So the decolonization must happen. And this is what we're going through in our country.
Mm-hmm.
We are going through a decolonization and a deconstruction.
Pull up what the acronym said here, he's asking a question about a topic.
She is asking.
I mean, I'm sorry.
You want me to address it?
Yeah, I want you to. I'm sorry, baby. I was thinking about some other people.
She says, I hope this is not off topic, but do you think some of the evil people do that they are non-human beings?
Okay, now
Wait.
go ahead.
I'm asking because they seem to have no humanity whatsoever.
Now listen, sweetheart, I just saw online just before we came online on television. There are several islands that they have discovered have some of the most vicious creatures. There is a island where the rats are taking over all of the natural content of this island.
The penguins,
The vegetation, the rats by the thousands are killing off everything on the island except for themselves and maybe some of themselves. This is a thing that is showing itself from the dark side of the ego. We call ego edging God out, but it's deeper than that. It's more finite than just ego. It is, like I've always said, a ghost with a bad toothache.
Mm-hmm.
And this toothache is opposites, Democrats and Republicans, left side of the road, right side of the road, the middle of the road, vicious road rage, killing, and some more of this is going to take place in the country because of the recent current events of what is taking place of a war and destruction, even with protesting. Now, these are the fulfilling of creatures that in the lower vibrational dimension are raging and they are having a fit. Now, in all of this, Jacqueline, is what's going on. I see the book of Daniel in the Bible in the same case. Now, watch this same situation with King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar was going against the flow of oneness with God and the presence of the God of the universe, God Himself, the way he ran himself into insanity. Now, hear what I'm saying to all of you. Some may agree or not, but there's an insanity that's going on in the White House. In the house.
So be careful.
I'm not talking about people. I'm not talking about our president, but you know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the insanity that's in the spirit world of darkness that's carrying out a command from its leader in the dark world. And I'm not calling names or positionalities. I'm just telling you what I see and know that I'm not allowed to speak direct about, but this will be like this. What comes out the front door, go around to the back door, will get beat in the butt.
Yeah. Now
I rest my case.
I want to bring it back around. I know we're speaking in spiritual terms, but there is also it's evident what's happening in the culture that's been prevalent in our country. So this isn't against anybody's policies.
No political parties.
I'm not talking about policies, but there is a need in our country from those who are in the leadership positions, and I'm not necessarily talking about the president, I'm talking about any
Any
the
position.
Any
percentage,
leader.
1% at
Mhm.
the top who actually govern this world. There is the need in their minds to eliminate the weak.
Is exactly.
And the way that it's
Exactly.
being done, and the way that it's being done is by removing health care
Yep. There you go.
and deportation.
There you go. Columbus sailing on the boat.
It's to decrease the population, remove and eliminate the weak.
Which takes
This
us
is
right
what's
back to the
happening.
wild kingdom.
And so there would be no other reason to remove health care from people who need it,
That's
except
right.
you're ready to get rid of them.
That's right. That's the way they purge.
There's no reason to be locking up and throwing people out who are not criminals.
Yep.
Except you're trying to decrease the population and remove it. So this is what we're experiencing in our country. It has to happen for the deconstruction and the decolonization. I don't like it. We can't change it. So all we can do now is ride this wave.
Let me
And
tell
so
you.
I hope I'm not saying too much.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to say this because I'm all for blacks, because I don't consider myself for or against either.
Well, it's not just affecting the blacks, like you said.
It's affecting
And
everyone.
I said this last year, even with the people, as the Lord was revealing, like you said earlier concerning the prophets, I was telling them things that y'all need to begin to prepare for, what you needed to do, how you make your adjustments or whatever, because all this stuff was coming down the pike. I told them that
Yes.
actually almost 2 years ago. And you're bringing it up now. And so one of the things that I want to highlight that Dad was talking about in the biblical days, I'll put it that way, because he was talking about Nebuchadnezzar and how the relationship that Nebuchadnezzar had with Daniel.
Mhm.
Daniel was the prophet, I'll say,
Yes, he
who
was.
he consulted with
That's what I want to say.
before he made certain decisions.
That's what I want to
Again,
say.
if we go back to study that book, Nebuchadnezzar loved Daniel.
Yes.
Yes, he
He
did.
loved Daniel, but the other group
Mhm.
tricked Nebuchadnezzar into making a decree
Yeah.
that they knew that Daniel was not going to follow because it would have caused him to worship another god. And he
Thank
was not
you.
going to do that.
Thank you.
So it was
Thank
a setup
you.
to try to get rid of Daniel. Because the
Thank
decree
you.
was that when they made the statue of
Listen, Dad, you
Nebuchadnezzar,
hear it?
when the music was played, they were supposed to bow down and worship the idol of Nebuchadnezzar,
That's true.
the statue of Nebuchadnezzar,
Yes.
and they was forbidding them to pray towards their God, which is God.
That's right.
That way.
Mhm.
And so the Chaldeans, they knew that Daniel was not following the decree.
That's
And
right.
they ran to Nebuchadnezzar saying, Nebuchadnezzar, did you not say X, Y, and Z? And for anyone that did not follow your decree, they was going to be thrown in the lion's den.
That's right.
And that's how that situation came about concerning Daniel. Because remember, when Nebuchadnezzar discovered that it was Daniel, it talked about how, just paraphrase, how heavy his heart was. That's why he was constantly going to the lion's den, checking to see if Daniel was still alive.
Right.
And so
Right.
when he brought Daniel out, he then made another decree
Okay.
that everyone would now worship and serve the God of Daniel.
There you go.
This is what's happening. So this is why there's this push now in the arena of politics. There's this push to go back to biblical values. When I just read to you what the biblical values are,
Mm-hmm.
to keep us as servants.
And you're making reference to the King James biblical values.
I am.
Yep.
It's to keep us as servants, keep us subservient.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to biblical values is what we have called this country a Christian nation, but it has never been a Christ-like nation. It's been a Christian religious nation.
Exactly. And the reason why I know this is because I was going to mention this. If you listen to uh on Siri, the different political channels and stuff, like CNN, whatever, they would have these commercials, and one of the dominant commercials that been popping up on the radio is them promoting Christian nationalism.
Mhm. It's a push. They're
Yes,
pushing to do it. Yes.
yes,
Yes.
and I did my research on that, and that is not the character of God.
Christ. It is
No,
not.
nope.
It is not.
It's like you said, Ma, is to take us back to what we were delivered out of.
It's to take us back to subservient positions.
Mhm.
And those of us who are awake, we're saying, oh, no, we're not going back.
Mhm.
Not going back.
Listen to this. When I started out, what got me into the ministry was first mild-mannered saying, my wife, let's move on right quick, because she asked me to go to church first time, second time, she didn't have to. I had the experience of seeing Jesus in person. From there, she began to see him too. Now, here, make it short. I set up under many, many mentors. And one of the mentors I sat under, maybe two of them, they would, one of them would let me do the Sunday morning service. And here I am in my 20s, early 20s and 30s. They would let me take over the church while he was gone. And when he'd come back, it would always be an uproar because he was uh, saying that there is no second coming of Jesus. And during that time, I was convinced that, like Israel waiting for the eastern gate to come open, I was looking forward to seeing him in the sky. Now, all of these people who preached about the second coming of Christ back when I was before born said that if you didn't believe that, you didn't believe in God in the second coming. He would preach that there is no second coming and that the day of Pentecost was the coming of Jesus Christ, being baptized in the Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues, the Spirit of God give utterance. And that was the second coming. And he would always say that everybody looking for some man to break the eastern sky. Ain't no such thing as that. We done already broke the eastern sky when he broke into your heart. This man wanted me to take over his Sunday morning services, and it was a big place. It was apostolic. I'm just say it like it was. And at the end of it, I said, now watch this. I said the only thing that would stop him, a lot of the pastors knew him, and he sprayed that gospel around all over North Carolina, Winston-Salem, and places in Virginia. And I told my wife that the only thing that would stop him is the cooling board. As a young man, and I wasn't trying to be mean. I knew. All right, let's stop right there. I was raised up with a man in the family during the slavery time. He developed a business of selling moonshine and cutting wood.
Which was the first entrepreneurial effort for Black men.
That's right. And in his neighborhood and the gatherings, I had a chance to meet some of the top of the line bootleggers on the street that I lived and in other places in the country. He was known for plowing people's gardens, and they had doing that kind of stuff going around the street called the rag man would come around and pick up all the rag. Then we have the ice man that came around and brought blocks of ice that they cut and put in these manual operating refrigerators. I was raised in a place where a man had money. $100 was valued at over $1,000. $50 was valued as a couple of $100. It was really, really something. $20 and 10 cents, 20 cents, all of that kind of stuff was really highly rated. But this man was so mean. He had no conscience of people. He would be in the churchyard and see somebody that he didn't like or something somebody said to him. He would pull a knife out in the church, big meeting churchyard, and put it around their neck. I'm standing there watching this, and my aunt was watching it too. And he would tell somebody, one of them people, and he's a little short man too, but he was mean as a two-headed snake. He said, I'm gonna cut you. And they would back off. He would go down in the woods, get a pint jar load of moonshine and drink it, him and my aunt, and come back up there and go to church and sit there in a drunk religious site and leave from church, real reality, spirituality, and go from that church to another house where all the church members that was positional in my family up in the country there and at this other place, and they would get drunk after church and go home fighting in the car and go home and drop me and my aunt off and go back out in the street and pay some lady's rent in order to get into bed. Now watch this. I'm telling you about slavery, old time, and how this thing is a cycle that's going on in the church spirituality and our political parties. These people are drunk off of no conscience
And power.
and power.
Yeah.
I just saw today on the news that here in North Carolina, because of the heat wave, there are more snake bites.
Oh yeah, I remember that too. Yeah, they said about that today.
What we have in this country, and this is parallel to what we have in this country. There is a heated climate in this country.
Mm-hmm.
So there are more people now being harmed because of this heated climate.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen, and a report from the council room, okay?
Yeah.
What's going to happen is we're going to see, because of the recent transactions that have taken place,
Yeah.
we're going to see more terrorism
Thank you.
inside this country.
Thank you.
Violence. Well, Dad
Straight.
said something. Dad said something last week, and I've said it several times before. How Hollywood is more prophetic than quote unquote
Yeah.
the church.
Yeah.
If you go back and you look at the movie Predator,
Oh Lord.
they only showed up in regions where there
Oh yeah.
violence and the temperature was very hot.
That's one of the first one Arnold's made.
Because for some reason, when the temperature rise, man's anger rises as well. And so their challenge was to always compete against the warriors or those that were fighting and being violent. They did not touch anyone that was nonviolent. There was always the challenge, and the competition was to defeat whoever the warriors were at that time. So again, that's why I was sharing with everyone on Sunday concerning what's happening with the weather, the temperature, and what's going to violence is going to increase. And I hate to say that. Like I told them, I don't want you to be alarmed, but I want you to be aware of what's happening. And so, as Mom was mentioning concerning a lot of the prophets, if you've been following a lot of the prophetic utterances that is out there in the atmosphere now, just about every prophet is warning everybody concerning certain supplies that they need to get. And they are including, which is so surprising, and they are including, you better get you, I'm gonna say like we say in the streets, you better be strapping.
Yeah.
That was really nice to say that.
Yeah.
Literally saying that right now because of the temperament that's happening within, well, not just in our nation, around the world.
Yeah, the spiritual temperature. Now, I have to say, everything that we see in the physical is really like a clue or evidence or symbolism of what's happening prophetically and spiritually. And so recently, like I told you guys, me and Dad had this thing with our electricity, where if we ran any kind of appliance in our house, all of the lights would blink in the entire house. And it's because there was one wire that's under the ground that's been there for over 40 years that has now broken down, and they call it the neutral.
Okay.
They call it the neutral.
Y'all live in a prophetic house.
Here we go. we had to get we had to call an electrician. And I already knew this was the problem because I did Dr. Google. I went to Google University, and I knew this was the problem. But Duke Energy said, no, that's not the problem. And you are doing fine. Your power's fine. You have no problem with your voltage.
That's what they said.
The electrician came out and he said, you got a problem with your neutral. Okay, here we go.
And he wanted us to replace the whole power box.
Yes. Now, here we go. The electrician was paid. Thank God it was a minimal amount, but he was paid. He has not cashed that check. Hear me. He has not cashed that check.
That's your eyes
That's
come up.
been over 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
He has not
Your
cashed
eyes
that
popped
check.
up.
And look, the first guy from Duke Energy said, you're going to have to pay an electrician to come in here and fix all of your lights.
That could cost
Okay?
thousands
Thousands of dollars. How about Duke came out this morning, replaced the neutral, it wasn't even broken in our yard.
in somebody else's yard.
It was in somebody else's yard. So now our power is excellent.
Yeah, back
So
on.
here we go, parallels. God is saying that no matter what's going on in this environment, you will be safe.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
There will be no power deficit. There will be no power deficit.
And that's why I share with them again. I want you to be aware, but not alarmed. We're gonna be okay.
Mhm.
We're definitely gonna be okay.
Yeah,
But you definitely need to know.
Be okay, be aware, don't be afraid, but be awake.
Mm-hmm.
Be awake. And so, having said all, I feel like I've been on my soapbox tonight. I really feel it. And I felt really, really strong about saying these things to you guys. Deconstruction. Now, what we've been talking about basically is the decolonization. Deconstruction is what you are experiencing, Pastor Norman, in your church. Because now the culture, like you said, of your church has completely changed. The dynamics has completely changed. Talked to someone just recently who has always done church in their building. They can no longer get people in. But it's not because people won't come. It's because people see through the illusion. They will not continue to go to the old ways. Those old ways don't work anymore.
Exactly.
They don't work anymore. They will not work in this season.
And one of the things that, and I'm gonna say this, one of the things that a lot of people are awakening to, and like you said, be woke. They noticed that a lot of things that were being implemented and executed in the gatherings were manipulative.
Yeah. Yeah.
They weren't empowering the people, they were manipulating the people. And a lot of not saying all, but they understood human nature and what to do, what to present, what to create, the type of production to get the people to react a certain way.
Yeah.
And that's what they call church, but it was not church at all.
And it has kept those of us who've been in church dependent on someone else.
Exactly.
Instead of allowing us to become self-reliant, instead of allowing us to become self-sufficient, instead of allowing us to grow to the point where we don't need to lean on something else besides that God that's already inside of us.
And I made that statement Sunday. I made that exact statement. Yep.
You okay?
But I want to speak to your heart.
Okay, Pastor.
From the heart. What has happened for the last 35 to 50 some years that we've been together, my wife and I, and also in the business of ministry? I didn't know that there was such a thing as getting back to your true self.
Mm, mm.
I never heard of anything like
Mhm,
that when I
mhm.
started out because I thought my true self was what they put on my birth certificate
Yes.
when the day I was born. Now I just found out years ago that I was all the way through school. My birth date was 11/27/47. Then I pulled out the old birth certificate and I realized after checking into it that it was an error in the date of birth. And during that time, somebody
And
was
that was
scribbling.
and that was because your mom didn't really remember what day she had you.
She didn't. She didn't. But I remember when I was born and where I was born, in the room I was born in, being carried long enough till I got a year old before they took me to Cape Beard and Reynolds Memorial Hospital on the first floor in a baby bed, and I was circumcised. I had a blank space in there where I went out, and I come back, and I was shorter than what I am now. But anyway,
Okay. Shorter than you were now?
yeah, it's short. I mean, it's really short. So anyway.
You are bad. You are bad. Bad.
Yeah,
Bad.
I thought I threw a little humor in there.
Yeah, because
Shorter than what he
I'm
is.
glad you did because this has been very weighty. It's been, in fact, I feel all of this energy in me just bringing it to you guys. It's weighty, so I'm glad you.
Okay, now here's what I'm
Go
trying
ahead,
to
be
say.
bad. That's
I'm trying
okay.
to say, getting back to ourselves, I thought that was me on my old birth certificate. I still have it upstairs. So I had to go years wrestling with changing my birth on paperwork and legalities and things like that. And I finally got my license renewed with the stop in front, but I had to go through a whole lot of trying to get in for an appointment for driver's license renewal, and I never did. But I went one morning in Winston-Salem at the driver license place where I got my license when I was 16. And by the grace of God, they worked me in. Yeah. But the guy that filled out my information, I had my birth certificate, the original one, the new one also.
He failed to even look at it.
And he failed to even look at the birth date. Something didn't want my birth date to change. But I remember this now. When I was born and came from in the room where my mother gave birth to me, Dr. Coleman was the house doctor that visited people there, and that's what they used to do years ago. This man was standing behind a door over right at 7 feet tall, real big, heavy man, and he was trying to get a date with my mama. He liked her, and I saw him before he died, and his name was given to me because they didn't know what else to call me. So that his name was Cliff, C-L-I-F, and you could spell C-L-I-F as a name or C-L-I-F-F as a cliff, like on dirt in a mountain. So they named me Clifton, T-O-N, Eugene, E-U-G-E-N-E, Sawyer, S-A-W-Y-E-R. They put all that stuff in the bowl and mixed it up, and here I come. Now, my true self was not Clifton Sawyer, nor was it Clifford. Her brothers called me Clifford, and in the school they called me Sawyer, and the students, but the teachers called me Clifton.
And I call you Boo.
She fixed that. Clifford and Boo.
We answer to a whole lot of names, don't you?
And my mama used to say, when she said Clifton Eugene Sawyer,
you knew what she was mad
she'd get ready to put that extended hand out there around the curve and slap my jaw. Then here come my daddy when we was in the liquor house, and I was, they said, don't cuss around children. So I wanted to be in the kitchen where the grown folks were. And
they tell you don't cuss around children.
No, because
but then when they run you out the room, they say, Clifton, get you out.
What I get ready to talk about this. So I'm sitting in there and I'm taking my time eating because I want to hear what the grown folks talking about. And it was during this time that I learned how to see what it was like the Sammy Davis tap dancing. Then they call it buck dancing.
You were in there getting conditioned.
I was
wasn't
getting conditioned by the tea. I was
you? You
specialized
was
conditioned.
soaking it up.
Saw it. Thank you very much.
Soaking it
And
up.
so when my daddy, they started cussing, and then my aunt would always say, my dad said,
Did
"Yo,
you-
watch your mouth.
did-
Get. You see this boy sitting here at the table?
Did you practice cussing?
Yeah, I did." And so my daddy would say, "Here's what my daddy." I didn't know whether my name was Clifton Sawyer or what my daddy called me. My daddy used to call me Clifton, get your ass.
Dad,
Don't cuss in front of the children.
No cussing from the children, but he used to say, "Clifton, get your ass." And so somebody was talking in the kitchen one
You're
time.
not cussing now. You just repeating. What
Yeah,
he
repeat
said.
what they said. And somebody in the kitchen would be talking, and they would say, "Get your ass out of here."
You know, that's what.
And when they say, "Get your ass," I say, "What did you call me?" And I go in the kitchen.
Stop it. Stop it. Jacqueline told us that time you started talking like this. She said, "It's
that is funny.
But I didn't tell you what happened. I was conditioned, and every time somebody in the kitchen would say,
no, we got it.
"Yeah, get
You
your ass,"
don't have to keep
I
saying
run
it.
in there. I've seen
You
it.
you enjoying that,
But my
aren't
point,
you?
yeah.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm saying is now, in the process of finding out who I was, now I'm gonna tell you something. Now, this is real. I noticed over a period of years around the churches that I went to preach. When I preached about Galatians 2:20, a union with Christ and who I really am, I wasn't going into it as deep as I do now.
Right.
I was really talking about it from the standpoint of the ego. It was then after these preachers started giving me trouble, my mentor, who was a prophet in Winston-Salem during that time, said, and he was very egotistical and self-centered and very protective over the ego possessions of the church.
Mhm.
I thought that I was doing what he taught me to do, was go to churches and preach like he did. He would walk the benches and tell the homosexuals they going to hell, and everybody going to hell.
And he had a church full.
And a church full
Because
of
he attracted them.
attractions of the homosexual, which I understand what's going on with it. But anyway, here's the long story short. I did not know that churches was against me, because I used to turn around and talk to the deacons on the board up on the pulpit and the ministers up there that was in that denominational. They would be trying to shut my mouth up under their breath, and I'd turn around and look at them and tell them which one of them up there was doing that. I went to churches where they had people plotted out in the audience to come against me with the pastor, and that soon as I got up and started talking, they were going to shut me down. And I would turn around and tell them, as a young man preaching, "You are trying to stop me from preaching what I'm saying." And I turn around in the audience and point out the one that was set out there in the audience. I said, "You're the one that called the pastor and told him that you were going to try to shut me down tonight in this service."
Mm-hmm.
Then when I called the pastor's wife after I left the church, she said, "Yes, that's what they decided to do." And I told her, and I told the pastor, and that was shutting me down because I was telling the truth about this. Now watch this. When you fully aware of the Christ consciousness and set out to show the manifestation of what we've been talking about online, there's a little black bird that flies around and gets on people's shoulder in your family, in your denominational schism, that hang around the graveyard and do nothing but worship the dead bodies in the casket, metaphorically speaking, and they will cause your family to turn against you and never invite you back to their church.
Now you know you're speaking specifically about what happens to prophets.
Right.
It happens. It happens. To
My
prophets.
top of the line mentors,
And
did not want me to
it's
preach.
because prophets are given the mission
That's right.
to bring reform to the church.
I'm telling you what's
And
real, y'all.
This is why they're not your typical pastors. They're not your typical preacher. They are called to bring, their whole mission and purpose is to bring reform to the church. Reform means I'm going to form this over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to shape this whole thing over again.
Yeah.
And that's going to require change, and people resist change. So
Yes.
that's why you went through that. Now, I know we're over time, so we can
But
keep
here
going on and
it
on and
is.
on. But
What I would preach from is my experience of seeing Jesus Christ 24/7. In the book of Acts, it tells you in a certain part of that where the disciples, even after Jesus had ascended back or raised from the dead, they preached that they could see Jesus 24/7.
yeah, they did.
Mm-hmm.
And I started going through this 24/7, seeing him, and certain one would ask me, how do you see him? That was a part of an experience that was so detrimental that I could not, and still have problems with not telling people that I saw him and his mama and the council chamber and all the details of the years that I went through of suffering with my own. I thought church people would be glad to hear me talk about seeing the living Christ in person, but it turned on me. It turned, and they started stabbing me in the back with undermining me when they got back up in the pulpit and said, he's young, he don't know, he'll find out. I found out over the years that there was an ego message being preached in the brick and mortar that caused people to be shut down in blindness, just like our country is today.
Mm-hmm.
You're on the soapbox again.
I'm preaching out, but I
from serious to humor, now we're back on serious, but we're about to.
But that was my name. They called
Yeah.
that was my name. They called me that. They called me Clifton, get your ass.
Now that's enough of that.
What's wrong with that? Jesus wrote an ass into the
Oh, that is so good.
Oh my gosh.
That is so good.
If-
They might shut me down now. I
They
don't know.
gonna shut you down. They gonna shut you down. They gonna shut you down. And look, Pastor Mama didn't know all this is coming out of. Don't blame him for it. Don't blame
Oh,
him.
wait, hey, I knew something was coming because it never fails.
All of us had cut the edge off.
Yeah, he did.
But
he did.
we'll talk about this some more. And I'm being straight down the middle of the road with you.
You are-
And I'm not
don't
trying,
start-
and
don't
I'm not,
start another
I'm
sermon.
not trying to cuss or be certain ways. I'm just telling you what caused all my sermons with when the mentor guy, the guy that was a seniors over me, they didn't like it because I was preaching from scripture of my experiences. And they would always say, the prophetic ones that's supposed to be prophet, always say, you're preaching to yourself. You preaching
That was for you.
that was for me,
was
they'd
for
always
you.
say.
Mhm.
But I was preaching because I couldn't read well like them.
Well, not only that, we were trying to and attempting to let people know that there is a life that is much greater than this physical life, that is more real than this physical life.
Thank you.
We're gonna rest our case unless my husband starts up again, okay?
I ain't gonna say, Brother Oliver, thank you. I'm gonna cut the edge off right now. I'm gonna cut the edge
Oh
off.
my God. For those of you who
If you want to comment about it, let me hear from you.
listen, for those of you who are Bible book saved and you don't like to hear people say stuff like this, then I apologize. But if
I
not,
do too,
it's okay. It's okay.
but I'll say it again.
We're just real people. You know, we used to pray that prayer.
You want to hear it? I'll
Lord,
start over.
I just want to be real.
I'm ready to start it
This
over
is-
now.
This is real.
You want to hear it again? I'll do it now.
Look what Oliver says. Look what Oliver says.
Yeah, y'all is funny.
You got that? Look at it. And don't be looking at me with that head on balance. Boy, I tell you.
Y'all know y'all cuss when ain't nobody around. You
Lord have
know,
mercy.
you stump your toe and use your finger. You know you be cussing. We know. We know.
Look, Oliver going to start him up again.
That's my name. That's pretty true. That's my name.
Listen, we're going to take off here. We're going to take off here and give you the opportunity to give. Listen, I want to say to, yeah, I'm there. I'm there. There's a young man, I want to mention his name. He doesn't I don't think he's ever commented on here, but this young man gives to us so
I never seen
often.
anything like it.
He obviously doesn't have a lot, but he sends something to us almost every day or every other day. If it's not but $2, $8, $5, $4.
We looked at it.
He sends it, and I mean it's a long
list.
He just constantly giving. And that means he's making a statement and he's saying this information is valuable to me. And I love it. So Raymond, I don't know who you are, but I love you for being the way you are. Thank you so much for making that statement. And it gives us a lot of courage. It gives us a lot of confidence. It makes us feel like we know that somebody is getting it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. It's just the fact that he's been so consistent. So consistent.
Let me say this right quick. There was a man that came to my church. A few of them I found out that had guns. Ladies had guns in their pockets.
Is this going to be a long story?
No. They came to my church and I ministered to him and told him about what was going on behind the curtains with a relationship in his family. And he didn't like it. And I found out from one of the main people in my church that was connected with him that he was going to, in that first old building on McConnell Road, Pastor Norman, you remember, he would stand outside the door with his daughter and jump me. I had women come in and say they had guns in their pocket and they were going to pull it out and shoot.
Now we can't end on that.
But now I'm telling you this because this is the stuff that the King James Version talked about that got Jesus crucified. If you go to talking this stuff reluctantly, understanding the full weight of enlightenment and waking up, certain things going to happen and you're going to think you need to bind and loose the devil, and the devil may be behind it, but he's disguised as Clark Kent as the ego. I rest my case.
You sure?
Stillness speaks, don't it?
You sure?
Stillness speaks.
You sure? Holy moly. You can end on that. Look, guys, we'll be back on Sunday at 10. Pastor Norman will be back on Sunday at 9. And we look forward to being with you and hope that you have a wonderful rest of the week. And stay cool if you're in the Carolinas. You're going to have to try. It's all up the East Coast, though. The heat wave is all up the East Coast. And then your prayer time and your meditation time, we speak light and love into every last person, even those that we don't feel so kindly toward. We speak light and love into our president, and we make sure that we send that to him in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Be blessed. We'll see you next time.
See you on Turnaround, John. See you later, you guys.